Okay, hi guys, Matt Rhodes here. I'm with the caveman Marcus. How are you, mate?
Not so bad. Not so bad. It was a very good weekend so far.
Yeah, good, good. Right, and we've got something to talk about. The Arnold Strongman Classic, my favorite competition in the Strongman calendar. For guys that didn't watch it, or just as a recap, just quickly, Mitchell Hooper, back-to-back champion. Mateusz Kiliskowski, as always, in the top three, but didn't quite win it. So he was second. Then we had Tom Stoltman in third. We had Thor Bjornsson in fourth. And we had Bobby Thompson in fifth, right? So those were the guys kind of right in it to the end. So, right, we'll get into it. What I will say is always talking points are kind of slightly controversial issues, things like that. I asked people on Instagram to, suggest what they wanted to talk about, and it was all the usual controversial points. So we'll discuss them because we should. But this doesn't take anything away from the fact that we really appreciate Rogue. We really appreciate the Arnolds. For me, it's the pinnacle of strongman. We love what they do. We love that they give it to us for free to watch. That there's brilliant events that they put on. So overall, thanks for those guys. Thanks that they give us something to talk about. But yeah, we'll get into some of the big talking points because there's a few of them. Let's just kick off with the deadlift, Marcus. Thor smashing that out of the park. Pretty frightening to come back after 4 years out of the sport and do that, isn't it?
Yeah, as much as you'd like to say, oh, you expect him to be good, 4 years is a long time. The body composition side of things has to take into account. He's also relatively in quick time coming back from a fairly serious injury. What he's been able to do in the time frame is nothing short of spectacular, really. But to pull and look comfortable in the way that he's gone about his deadlift, I think is testament to obviously the work that he's put in. But it's quite frightening to think, actually, do you know what? When we hark back to that number that he has pulled before, come on, really, what could he have done? And what is he still capable of?
Yeah. I mean, that was 456 kilos that flew up because it's all he had to do. And that's an elephant bar, let's not forget, guys. We're not talking conventional. It's got the whip on it.
And you've seen some very, very good deadlifters, the likes of Evan, where he's pulled 1,000 pounds in Cardiff. It catches you out.
Yeah.
It is a bar that's clearly got its own characteristics. There is a form and technique guide that should probably go with it when you're looking to learn from previous athletes.
Yeah.
And to make it look comfortable, that's probably the key in there. I think is quite outstanding.
Yeah, it's amazing. So he won that. Bobby Thompson in second. Now, Bobby, for me, did something brilliant. He just came out and did one lift. It was, what did he pick? 436 kilos. Apologies to guys in pounds. Just came out, one and done. You've got to be extremely confident to do that. And you've got to be damn good at deadlifting to do that, haven't you? But he did it. And it saved his energy for the events. And he got probably the place that was the best he was going to be able to get, which was second.
Yeah. Tactically, that, as you say, confidence has to come into play. Also, until you're out there in what is essentially, a Bobby version 2, in the way that he's, put himself back together again, he looks phenomenal. And it's a great amount of work. That is a huge amount of work to achieve that physique. You never really know until you're on the kit. You'll have an understanding. You've got, sadly, Max is exactly the same. Shit can happen, and it is sad to see. But with what Bobby done and the way he's gone about it to sort of, preserve the energy he's got so he can play and box clever going into events that might not suit him, I think it was a smart move and well played, really well played.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm speaking to Mateusz during the event. He was telling me he now kind of regrets the way he did it. He wished he had gone for a lot more on the second because his second lift felt easy. Of course, he ended up missing the third lift. And what he wasn't really accounting for was he had literally 5 minutes between the second and third lift. And that's the thing about the Arnolds. If some of the guys, the top guys, aren't even coming out for their first lift yet. So people like Mateusz or already out for his third, but there's no gap with other athletes pulling in between. So there's a lot tactically and a lot to think about, isn't there? And you don't necessarily know what that gap's going to be because you don't know what the other guys are choosing for their increments. But yeah, I think actually in future, a lot of the guys may benefit from pulling more on their second lift than trying to save it all for their third.
Yeah, the Arnold's is an interesting one in the way that it's set up, especially when it look at the turnaround for not just the events but the lifts themselves and the way. It's probably where actually having a trusted, almost like a powerlifting style handler, is going to be useful and beneficial. You know, I was watching Mateusz go through, and literally as he's walked through the curtain, you know, one other person lifts, he's almost being ushered straight back out. You know, you've barely got time to readjust.
Yeah.
The second lift, I've sort of, you know, heralded, oh, he's back. You know, it's really nice to see because we know, you know, historically the deadlift has struggled, you know, suffered a little bit, but the manner in which he pulled it, okay, with a little bit more rest, there's only a few more kilos. You know, let's not get carried away. There's only a few more kilos, but again, it only takes that second lift, doesn't it, to actually separate your 1 point. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, because as it ended, Martin's only pulled, I think, 2 or 3 kilos more than Mateusz. So this is where it really matters. Yeah. Let's just talk about the next event was the frame, and we went from that to they call it the Webster Stones. I think it's like a Dinny Stones. They call the final the Webster. They call it the Dinny Stones, the third event. I forgot what way.
Well, it goes around social media. They're all calling it Dinny's. Obviously, it can't. Okay. They're in Tuck, but
a lot of people were saying that they felt the events are too similar, two very grip dominant events, one after the other. And there's only 5 events. To be honest, I would agree with that. When there's just 5 events, I really like both events. I think they look great. I think they are great tests of strength, true strongman events. But I would have put a push in instead of both of those. They've got the Wheel of Pain. You've got other options. Do you see it that way or not?
Yeah, when you've got something where it's set up with like a Dinny walk, it's also the damage that you're going to get with it as well. You know, there's a huge amount of issues that you're going to get with your hands. But again, are we just going on? Are they looking for Instagram clips? Are they looking for, you know, viewership post event rather than actually sitting down and making something that is comprehensive? Until you're in on those meetings, you don't really sort of know. But did it feel a little samey?
This is Rogue who have the options. The Wheel of Pain is not like, you know, a boring thing to look at. So they do have those options.
And that's the thing. It's a case of until you're in those meetings, it just feels like someone has an idea, everyone says yes, and away you go. Was it a good competition as overall? Yes. Was it a bit samey for some bits? Could it have been more dramatic? Could they have put other events in, like you say, a good push? Without a shadow of a doubt. I think have the walk in there because it is different in the sense of it's also the pain event.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where a lot of people won't get the, you know, again, Wheel of Pain is an example of that. But yeah, the whole thing of just jumping onto the stones thing at the moment is it's getting a little bit old for me.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems to stick, doesn't it? Across strongman, just something comes in and it just sticks. It's a shame
throwing back.
Yeah.
You know, throwing 1 minute and then so on and so forth. But, you know, as I say, is it just following trends and getting bums on seats and Instagram views?
Yeah. The biggest point of controversy, and again, this is coming up more and more, it's refereeing. And it is a problem. We've talked about it before here in our strongman chats. It was once again the most questions I got, people were asking me to discuss, was the refereeing. Now, we'll begin with Thor, who was given 2 reps on the axle. Now, quite clearly, his left arm wasn't fully locked out. That's the one over the pec injury he had on the second rep. It wasn't locked out. As soon as it was given, I thought, that's not a rep. That's not right.
Yeah.
Anyway, the ref was given it. On the down signal, he put it down. As he knew it, he had got 2 reps there. Now, he got the points, but retrospectively afterwards, they took the points off of him. Now, How do you see it? Do you see it now, referees' error, whether they give something they shouldn't have or they don't give something they should have? Once that's given, it's all on the ref, but you can't be then giving or taking away points afterwards.
Yeah, it has to be given. It has to be on the ref at the time. When you have these major competitions, it would be good to actually have meetings going into it, actually standards to work to. So at least you have a framework to work to. At least that way it can be articulated outwardly afterwards. This is what is expected. This is what we're working to. So the moment you put in that shirt on, you're assuming the responsibility. It is because the hardest bit when you're the athlete is you're doing everything you think you can do on the day. The moment you see a down signal, the moment you're told turn, the moment you're told completely lift or good lift, that's as much as you can do.
Yeah.
So we're very much reliant on these people being ringmasters, coordinators for that event, actually having and not assuming, because there is a pressure on the day, regardless of stature of whoever these guys are being brought in, whether it be Maggie or whoever, there is a pressure on the day. And also from that line of sight and perspective, when you're in there, you only need a split second of where you're not fully concentrated. Oh, that's it. Yeah. Because the difference being from here to here is a microsecond.
Yeah. I feel like you've been a bit generous. I believe that we all know when something's locked out and when it's not. Sometimes it can be very close, but that one with Thor, instantly I was like, that's not a rep. And straight away messages pinging on my Instagram. That's not a rep. Everybody knew it. I think, there's times when you can say, well, it's very close, but I don't think that was one. But there's no way that after the fact you can be taking points off or putting them on, because one, Thor, as he thought, he had the rep, and that meant potentially he couldn't have gone for more when he would have if he knew he didn't get the rep. It also means that competitors that went after him, that thought they were chasing a number that they didn't actually need to, so then expended energy that they wouldn't have needed to. There's so many things. If a ref makes an error, unfortunately, you have to stick with that. I think it's a huge mistake if we're going to go into this thing where you can add and take off points after the fact.
Yeah, because I say the whole playing field then is being altered.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm as sort of open to it as I am at the moment is, go back through to the road games as well. Is where you kind of expect it, sadly, and that's why I say I think building up to one of these competitions, actually having a sit down, going through and almost having an organisation within itself for refereeing standards would be no bad thing, because it's something that could be exceptionally simplistic but rolled out across the board.
Yeah. And then we go to Mitchell Hooper, and again, this is over and over, and this doesn't help him. And again, this is on referees, not the athlete. On the final event, the first was a stone overhead.
Yeah.
Now, we all know the head has to come through. He's not even close. He's arched back so much, and you look at the other guys in comparison, it will be on the screen here for people to watch. It's not even close. It's not even up for debate, and he's been given good lift. It's what's going on. We've seen this at World's Strongest Man. We've seen it. Is it pressure of the current champion that people don't want to do? Is it just huge coincidence that every time this guy is getting those lifts? But I would have thought now everybody would be aware, well, Mitchell Hooper's not getting his head through. I'm going to watch for that if I was a referee. So
again, if you're talking about going into something, you have these discussions, you're able to do it, and it's not to sort of safeguard the ref on this one, but just even when I looked at it, because obviously my head was still full of Mateusz and what he just absolutely just wiped the floor with the event. But when you're looking at it and you've got the referees are sat down, and I'm not making excuses for him at all, but even from a sat down angle, and he's pushed through, and you get to that point, even from where you're sat, you can't tell really the difference between there and there. And the manner, I think one of the things with it, and this is where, like, when you're working, especially more with natural stones than you are with like an Atlas stone press overhead, even though the ball itself is still hard to manage, is there is a risk element, and a massive one, not just in terms of a bicep, but as we saw with stones going over the back of us. Would I prefer to see a straight out to lockout, off the front down, even if you're just giving it a degree of angle, 15-degree angle? I'm happy to throw something like that in there because I'd rather safeguard the athlete. Was there an issue with the way that he pressed the stone up? Could he have done it? You look at it and just go, actually, do you know what? He made it look easy anyway. But I would give people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt purely for the fact that, do you know what? I'd like to safeguard him because the last thing I want with a natural stone is watching that come clattering back down on him, especially for what is essentially, it's a spectacle event.
Yeah, but it's a very different lift when it's directly above your head and when you're arched back almost in a bench press position. It's a very different lift.
Yeah. But again, if you do it, press it, did you get away with it in that sense? Yeah. Did you make it look easy? Did the ref give you the down signal? And that's the things that need to be be addressed. Because I certainly, if I had an easier way of getting that stone up or something that made me feel safer, would I take it? Bloody right, I would. Yeah.
And if retrospectively points are taken away with Thor in the event before, but it wasn't the case with Mitch, there we have a huge issue.
Yeah, because you're making a rod for your own back then, and it causes controversy in itself of where all the athletes are being dragged in when all they've done is they've gone out there and just tried their hardest.
Again, we always say this, it's nothing to do with the athletes. The athletes work off the referee's call, and if the referee's making an error, but this is where this has now got messy because they took one back off Thor afterwards.
Which in this instance for Mitch is a shame because actually the way he went about his trade this time round, and you go back to that event as well when he's called Arnold up, and I know he's taken a panning for this. Because he calls him up and then you know yourself, you've got to have some balls to be able to do that. No, because you don't. This is the thing. You don't think you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And from the athletic point of view, to be able to do it and ride it off, actually, fair play to you. Because I think this time around he'll take the panning because it's just like, no one sets up to fail. But no, it is a shame because, I say, you can have a really good competition. Thor can have a really good competition. Mitch can have a really good competition, and these little things just take the gloss off.
Yeah.
And it's the months and months of work that goes into prepping for this.
Yeah, I believe that's why it's better to talk about these things as well, because when certain people and fractions in the sport try to gloss over it, it doesn't help things. People talk about it and say, okay, it did happen. It was mucked up, but we can move forward, But that's the way I see it.
But don't pretend it hasn't happened.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't help anyone. Exactly. Let's talk about a couple of pluses here. Like I said, the live stream is free, which is incredible really for us. Live and free. It runs very quickly, very efficiently. You got time to go grab something to eat and you're back for the next event. It's awesome. And they're running now the men's and the women's concurrently. It's really awesome what they're doing like that, isn't it?
Yeah, because beforehand as well, when you used to think about sitting there and watching those, the gaps in between were massive.
Yeah.
The way it's actually been integrated, and they made a really good, the way that they put the women forward as well, and the way that the show ran, it was entertaining all the way really through. Cool. And when you've got the likes of Lucy Underdown, Andrea Donna, Inez, and then I cannot remember the girl's name that's actually won it, which I feel terrible about. But it was actually, there's always little bits in there. Rebecca Roberts coming through. It's good. It's good entertainment, and it strings the whole thing together because you have comparative events.
Yeah. And these are very heavy events as well. So it's not even that argument that the athletes need a rest. Maybe they do, but these are very heavy, and they're still able to do this. The flow of it is bang on, really impressive.
And for the female side of things, the money isn't there for sponsorships for those women that were able to excel even on one event. And a little tip of the hat as well to Sam from Canada, because anyone that makes a dumbbell, and that is a big dumbbell, make it look that easy and own it. That is just technical ability and hard work. Fair play to you.
They're doing everything they can to bring in those sponsors because the performances they're putting on. Yeah. Let's get on to a point that's probably my biggest kind of bugbear at the Arnolds is too many zeroing. We're starting to see that now. You're getting... it's getting messy, I think. I remember a couple of years ago, we had the monster dumbbell where you had 4 guys zero it and they picked up 2.5 points each. And yet you had a guy before who's squatting, say, 370 and only getting 1 point, you know? It's getting a bit messy like that. The Arnolds used to do things like you had 2 options for the log. So there was a lighter log. Obviously, if you lifted a heavier log, 1 rep on that took precedent over multiple reps on the light. But at least you had those options. You used to have on the axle, you used to have points just for cleaning it and then for overhead.
I think because didn't we have clean for the Austrian oak as well?
Yeah. Well, like I say, the Austrian oak at one point they had 2 different logs, one lighter, but the axle you could get points for cleaning and then for overhead. That way you made sure everyone was getting points on the board, or pretty much should be. And then, you know, the points gap and what athletes could make or lose on each other was much more fair, basically, across all events. Whereas the way it is now is getting very messy, and the way it worked out, Thor went from 2nd to 4th. You'd have to say over the 4 events before that, he wasn't really a guy that you could say was in 4th place. And if it was another event such as the deadlift, he would never have lost that amount of points. I think it's a real error. One is a miscalculation on the events, first of all, by the organizers, because if you're making like that final event where there's 3 stones and most of the field can't even pick the first stone overhead, that in itself is a major problem. I actually believe we just needed the tombstone as the final event. I don't know why we needed those first 2 stones. The tombstone looks awesome, and you could have done a point for lapping it, and then, you know, 5 points or whatever it is for putting it on your shoulder. That way, everybody was likely to get points, and the point spread would have been correct, and it'd been much more fair. As it was, pretty much for Thor, everything came down to one event at the end, which just for me doesn't feel right at all.
No, it isn't a fair representation of how the sort of athletes actually stacked up, because as I say, there is a discrepancy from one event to the next in the way that the points, whether you win, lose or draw. But again, like we said, with the events themselves, it could have just been a little bit cleaner. It could have been a little bit better thought out, but also going into testing, of which, they're not going to throw something in that they don't think people can do, but be completely aware of it rather than a guesstimate, because the guesstimate has backfired, and how many people, basically battled. And with something like this as well, we're at the start of March. That's your season over style of event as well. There's a lot that can go wrong, and I think you have to. I know it's a case of everyone knows what they're walking into, but I think there has to be a little bit of an understanding of, do you know what? Let's safeguard these guys, because it is the start of the season as well. We want heavy, but we don't want high risk. Fatigued athlete right at the end trying to put a stone over your head, that's high risk.
No, I would agree, but they have to go back, I think, to having points for lapping, for half reps, or an option of a lighter. But when you just stick a stone there like that, and most of the guys aren't lifting it, anyone that then didn't lift it, even if they were in the top few, which in this case was Thor, so anyone who didn't watch the competition, Thor's overall result wasn't representative of his overall performance. And there's something wrong with that. But the strongman is meant to be over the entire set of events, because that's what it is. It's your strength over different things. So it's I hope they get back to something more like they used to do.
I hope there's not that you want people pulling themselves apart, but I would have thought they'd be sat there at the time just going, we didn't envisage this. What do we do? How do we correct this? And that's the thing. Open to discussion. This isn't a dig. It's just same as what we all want. Same as the athletes. We want to show. They want to feel that their work rate is representative in the final points tally. Open the discussion up.
Marcus, athletes going in order of overall placing in the competition in the next event, or going in order of how they placed in the previous event? Which do you prefer? At the Arnolds, they're doing it overall, but what that means is it's even harder for the guys behind to catch up.
I like previous event. Yeah, just because you can box clever, it allows a little bit of strategy sometimes to push to either afford yourself some timings going into the next one. And they say you're allowing for that little bit of strategy when it is just a case of runaway train. You know, if you are struggling, if you had a bad event, that can kick your heels away from you.
Yeah.
And then you are done. You know, as we said, just with one thing, strategy, just go with the deadlift. You can find yourself struggling purely for the fact that you're lifting back to back.
Yeah.
You know, if people, having that hamstrung and just doing it off the total points tally, I think it makes it a little more difficult for a really high level comp.
Yeah, I agree. And things like that, Dinny stones, where you have an exact marker to go for on the ground there, that's where, it can really help the guys get back into it a bit that are slightly behind at that stage in points. Okay. One last thing, maybe slightly on the negative side, and then I want to go to more pluses again. The stream itself, a lot of people talked about lack of moderation. For all the good people around the sport, there's a lot of idiots that say pretty nasty things in there, and that maybe it's better just not to have that live comments on. Do you think?
Yeah, I think just for the time being, not giving these people a platform in which to, because unfortunately you walk into a room full of 100 people, there's a strong possibility at least one's an idiot. You open this up, there is a lack of understanding with regards to the sport itself, even at a basic level. I've been sat in a crowd before, and a gentleman of 60 years old thought that the Atlas stones were made out of polystyrene. It was all a show, like WWE. But as I say, whilst it is still a niche sport in the way that it's, in the way that we compete, as it's opening itself up to a more global audience and we're growing, you're always going to fortunately uncover people which have their views and opinions, and we don't want to give them a platform.
Yeah.
Not until they're at least.
Yeah, I agree. And one final thing on the commentary, I like the fact that they had a lot of commentators. I like the fact that they shaped it up a bit with some different guys this time. However, they had a real habit of basically the bottom half of the table guys just talking over them completely as if they weren't even performing there.
Yeah.
Which is basically just a bit disrespectful. And it clearly wasn't intended to be like that, but you should be talking about the guy performing at that time,
Yeah, I think when you've got people coming in, I thought Jerry did a very, very good job. I actually liked Jerry on comms. And then it's nice to actually bring other athletes in. It's like when Andrea had posted up really well and bring her in. Because you're set up and you haven't been prepped for it, because most of these people don't have media training, which is, I still find odd coming in from another sport, even at this sort of level. You've got your code com, which is just, again, they've not been trained, so they're rattling through a majority of the next guy out to lift. I think just a little bit of prep, a little bit of tidy, a little bit of housework or something like that would do good, because they'd be mortified to know that that person's moment in the sun has been overshadowed by probably a bit of clumsy commentary.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. It was no kind of ill will at all. And like I say, I like individually the commentators they had. I thought it was really good. Just you don't want to be talking over a guy performing. And also when they were talking about, well, this guy's never really done this event before, or they were just taking into account Rogue and Arnold's as if they didn't know about the Shore Classic or Giant Live events or something like that. And it was a bit like, well, that's a bit strange. It's like,
again, it's what you've got is you're getting to the point now where we're getting closer to TV production, but without the TV production values.
Right.
When you're in and around anything from sort of athletics through to football, you see so much research. You'll see the clipboards in place, and you do your work. But as I say, it's all a bit brought in, get it done. Yeah, it looks good, but just a tiny little bit more research, a bit of time spent, it'll add a little bit of polish to what is a good product.
Yeah. Just finally then, let's go through a few athletes, what we thought of them. Thor's comeback was the big news. The way I saw it is, as expected, his conditioning wasn't quite there. It just caught up with him at the end. And also, very commonly, overhead is the last thing that comes back fully strength-wise. And both those things seemed apparent with him. It did also seem that where he's had that full pec tear only like 10 months ago, that was what was affecting the lockout on that arm. But overall, an incredible comeback. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it as a harsh thing to say it was a full 7 out of 10. You know, and I can't give it much more than that. One, not anything to do with the placing. It's just that I think if you were to sit down with Hathor himself and just say, right, okay, surmise what you did, your first one back with ring rust, so on and so forth, I think that's about as much as you could go. Anything more than that, realistically, you are kind of punching. What he's achieved and the way he's gone in the mix of what is arguably one of the best lineups we've had for God knows how long, in an era of where guys are coming through in remarkable condition. That guy spent 4 years out, you know, doing whatever he needs to do, strolled straight back in, and he's in the mix, ready to go.
And half the field have dropped like flies, and he's still there right to the end.
Yeah. If you replayed him the following day, replayed the whole thing with just that day's worth, there's 2 days worth of experience, he's immediately 3 points better off.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's not to like about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Based on that, can you see Thor going back to the top within a year?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got, and I think until you've actually lined up, because let's call it what it is, Mitch is a phenom. He really is. You know, he delivers. And until you've actually been, and this is the thing for anyone that's competed, regardless of what you see on TV, until you're actually lined up with someone and you watch what they do, how they go about it, you know, the little details and the way they handle themselves, it makes a big difference. Now he's actually stood there lined up and he's been beaten by him.
Yeah.
That'll unlock another level to him.
But also Mitch on that awesome level that he's at now, Thor for 4 or 5 events was with him as well. And so that says a lot as well.
Yeah, and I love the fact as well that you have got in that lad as well. You know, he'll relish that.
Yeah,
he'll love that because again, it's just like, what does he want? He wants competition. I think if Mitch just ran away with it for the next year or two, he'd be out the sport.
Yeah,
I think if you're in genuine competition and he's up against it, I think it's the one thing that will actually probably get the best out of him.
Right, let's talk about Evan Singleton's performance. People didn't like it after day one when I said I didn't think he was in contention for that 3rd place spot. The reason I said it is because over 2-day events, I expect him to burn out. I just don't think he controls his emotions in the correct way. Sure enough, it did happen. This time I was proved right. Maybe another time he'll prove me wrong. But it always feels to me that he's got the talent, he's got the skill set. But yes, he needs to be very emotional to perform well, but I don't think he controls it correctly. I don't think the format of strongman events over 2 days works in his favor. Why do you think that it's turning out that way for him?
Well, historically he's shown that. That's the, you know, it's not, you're not picking up on it as something that's not there to be seen.
Yeah.
And yeah, whatever you call it, whether you call it a switch, whatever you know, the fire, whatever you want to term it. Is it useful? Yeah, for some people it really, really is. But actually that ball of fire, being able to control it, manipulate it, turn it on, turn it off, is one of the reasons I've got, actually, there you go, I've them to hand. It's the reason why when we train people for it, we actually have dog clickers, a literal button to come on and to come off and to hone that skill. And it is a skill set. Raw power of absolutely no doubt. When he first burst onto the scene, very different in terms of style of character, but very Jesse Marundi in the way that he went about it. Very raw, very explosive, very powerful. It's just that this itself, being able to be a competitive athlete and learn a new skill set, which is being able to, again, turn it on, turn it off, not deplete all your mental energy in one go. That in itself is a craft, and hopefully it's something that he's going to take on board and refine, because he is an absolute weapon when he gets it right.
Because it's not just the case he gets fired out and comes out and does the event, does the lift, but once he's done the lift, he's still carrying on, and he's expending energy in that way. And as we know, away from the sport, he's got a lot of chat and things. It seems to be like that's within his psyche all the time, all this talking, and it doesn't seem to be able to turn that switch off.
In terms of comps, Evan's 2 different people. That's the one thing. You know, his biggest stuff sweet kid you can sort of get to sort of meet. He's but in terms of being, a lot of people will sort of ask, wait, right, okay, where do you learn something? Well, actually, this is a sport you'll be aware of, cricket. A batsman like an Alistair Cook. Alistair Cook is one of the guys that if you're going to learn a new skill set, which is being able to concentrate for long periods of time, when do you stay concentrated? How you do that, and honing a skill is something that Evan, could certainly learn. The thing is in terms of you learn from your environment. If you don't, then you don't develop. Mm-hmm. And something like the Arnolds, the bar, we go back to the deadlift bar. You can't have an explosive style for that deadlift. It will catch you out. And you can be as strong and as powerful as you like. If you don't learn off the kit and come back. So like next year, right, okay, do you improve? Are you better? Are you learning? You can be one thing, but ultimately the weight wins. You have to be both powerful, and this is where I've got huge respect for someone like a Mateusz over the years. You have to be clever. Yeah. You can't be dumb in strongman and be a very good strongman.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel that Evan, by now, should be more smart. He's got very good people around him, but it's not happening yet. Still not. Yeah. And it's taking a long time. Bobby Thompson. Bobby says himself, people write him off. He loves that. The thing that Bobby's got, I knew Bobby wasn't going to podium here. I said it. I like Bobby a lot, speak to Bobby, but I said he's not going to podium here because it's not his events. And Strongman, unless you're Thor, Big Z, Brian Shaw, it's all about events because most people have weaknesses. Very few don't. So just looking at it on paper, I was pretty certain he wasn't going to podium. But what I knew Bobby would do is make it to the end. And that's a big part of strongman at this level. If you can get to the end, you're always going to finish in a decent position. When all these guys are dropping like flies, Bobby Thompson now is a supreme athlete. He's got himself in incredible condition, and he's got the heart, and he's got the strength. And that's why I believe he does so well. And I thought for him, yes, he didn't podium, but I thought it was an awesome performance.
Importantly, put himself in the position to be there. That's it.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned about his conditioning and the actual physical state of him at the moment. He looks incredible, and that isn't just he's put a lot of work in. No, that is absolutely to the wall effort.
Yeah.
Whatever he has going on for him at the moment, he has earned every ounce of it.
And he got to that last event, and he got that stone up when it didn't look like he was gonna, and that right there showed everything that he's got, the grit he's got, and now the strength he's got, the whole package. To me, that showed it.
Yeah. Whereas the sort of fluffier, thicker version of Bobby, a couple of attempts on the stone, he's gassed, gone. Yeah. And it's nothing to do with heart because the guy's got heart in abundance. It's just that if you haven't got the physicality to match. Whereas now, what he shaped himself into, he looks the part. But if you're in at the end, you're always in for a fighting chance to pick up points. And it's whilst the podium was probably a little bit of a stretch, unless something happened to others, to be in the mix and be in that top 5, he's done himself proud there.
Yeah, with those events, because there's only 5 events, so if they're not in your favor, everyone's going to get caught out. Like I say, I thought he did great. Tom Stoltman. I'm going to say it. If Tom Stoltman, in my opinion, had a better coach, he would have done a hell of a lot more in the sport than he has already achieved, which is obviously great things. He's a huge talent, still young even now, but it's always the technical side of it that catches him out. It's just, for me, the coaching's not there, and Luke switched to a different coach and is doing immediately better. And people keep commenting, and when I make comments about it, people like to agree with that more than almost anything else I say. Perhaps, some people won't like to hear it, but I firmly believe that Tom Stoltman could do a lot more of the sport if he was coached in a better way.
Yeah, I've said something in the past in terms of just environment. Whether it's seen as detrimental or even as an attack when it's not. It's just that if Tom was in his own sort of place and travelled a little bit more, just go. I've always agreed with taking people out of their environments and putting them elsewhere, go and train with other people. Slightly different for Tom, obviously, because of routine. Autism comes in and plays a part on that side of it. But in terms of coaching, do you know what? At this particular stage, a change is as good as the rest. And he's done well. He's got bits and pieces. But again, are you making the same mistakes? Are you, are there things that other people... One of the things I can't quite get my head around within this as well, and you don't really see it in any other sport, you get a coach. I cannot wrap my head around that. Whereas if you go into any other, bigger sport, conditioning coach, you'll have a batting coach, a bowling coach, you'll have a kicking coach, you'll have a sprinting coach, you'll have a nutritional coach. You have a team.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it seems whether the people are precious, and don't want to open up, or whether it's a case of they've not been to those higher levels within other sports to understand how it can work for the betterment of an athlete, because we are a little bit behind the 8 ball. But I certainly think in Tom's instance, along with a number of others as well, actually opening your team up, getting in component parts to accelerate the development, because multiple heads, more experience, ultimately better end result.
So you would agree that ultimately coaching right now is probably the biggest factor in holding him back from doing even better than he's currently doing?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Because again, Tom, from the little I know about Tom, and I've known him for a fair amount of time, I've watched him cope really well when things should have gone out the way. Ultimately, he's won what he's won with who he's got. And Dan's got his methods. Are they always employed to the letter? Who knows? In terms of the conditioning element, you probably look at sometimes and say, well, did Luke follow everything to the letter? Because Luke, has underachieved, whereas Tom has done very, very well. But Tom is the sort of guy at the moment where he's like stone lifting. You give him baby oil, he's still going to pick up a 200-kilo stone. Watching him in 2019 firsthand, when all his kit goes and like literally falls to pieces, how he can still go on and perform. I think having a depth of team around him would serve him really, really well, because he is a percentage athlete in terms of he has got the physicality of that, there's no doubt. He's got the strength. He now has experience, even though he's still a kid. He's got a lot of World's Strongest Man appearances and titles behind him. Actually having, depth from outside this sport, but sort of professional development coaches around him. I think you could certainly find another 6 to 7% in him, which at that level is the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, it's massive. It's really massive.
Yeah.
Mateusz Kieliszkowski, same old story, I guess. Always in the top 3, always one of the top guys in the world, not winning it. All things said, I still think it was a great result for Mateusz. I don't think he could have hoped for better than that. Obviously, I'm in contact with him a fair bit, and his training is going well. This is the first time people forget the injuries he had, the absolute chaos he had with botched jobs on operations to fix these injuries. Huge amount of things. But Mateusz is only turning 30. He's not old himself. And even his deadlift has actually improved. It's never going to be up where some of these guys are now. But I just feel like another year or two of sustained training. He said himself he can't train like he used to every day. That's the same for everybody. He's going to get used to that. But if he stays away from injuries, there's going to be a time when it clicks, when the events are right for him and he's stronger than he is now. And I still have that belief that he's going to win a big one.
In terms of the tools outside of the deadlift, which is a shame really, because if you look at his deadlift, even post-injury, and were to put him back in from when he was injured, he's actually done very, very well. Yeah. It's just that the rest of the field have accelerated as well, so it makes it look like he hasn't gained ground when he actually has, and from a negative position. I think the same really applies to Mateusz. It does with Tom. I think actually having a depth of coaching structure around him, and maybe even from different sports, would probably do him the power of good. just within this sport, sometimes it can hold you back. But in terms of, I think confidence is needed. That comes in time. He's an exceptionally diligent trainer, hard-working trainer. But confidence is something that unfortunately you can't coach that in. That comes in time. The more he's in this fight, I think the more you're going to see a better performance from him. But what he did was at times was spectacular.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing progress. We saw the axle, that overhead coming back like that. We knew what was going to happen with a stone. It was the best we've ever seen on stones like that, overhead on the shoulder. Yeah, I mean, I know he says that the reason about coaches that he just doesn't like doing things online. He's not really a sociable person in that way. And he said if, he had a coach of that quality that was somewhere nearby, he would 100% go for it. It's not that he's anti-coach. Just for him, he just does not feel comfortable with that.
Available there. Yeah, which again, it's one of those things of where, from where he is, he's, from what I've seen, it's a fairly sort of remote place. He's not in the middle of the city where you've got an abundance of people or a facility around you, which is a shame, because realistically as well, for people that are, is he quite close to the German border as well, really. It's not a million. Do you know what? He's worth the travel. He really is, because it's a shame no one wants to make the journey, really, because within him they've got a guy that could win multiple titles.
But what we got to remember, I mean, a couple of years ago there was the squat, and of course he didn't make it to the competition, but I know his squat was going great, and he scored a hell of a lot more points than he does in the deadlift. So that's what I mean. If things line up, which I still feel they will, because realistically he could have 7-8 more years. If you take away a deadlift and there's another event in there and he gets stronger and stronger, which he will without getting more major injuries, he's got a huge chance, even with the lineup there is now. And then, there's always the factor that Mitch, for example, could be out 1 year. There's a lot of factors. So I think for him to come second, almost like a miracle with all the factors combined.
Yeah. And as people look, we know he's got miles on the clock. We know that he's got the scars to prove it. Boxing clever as you get older and you get into your 30s, heading towards your 40s as well. There's also resilience that comes with that. There is a maturity, and there is, the experience that comes with it. You can't write someone off just because they've had a few. Actually, how you manage your body again is another skill set that can be worked through. But have we seen the best of him? No. It would be a shame if we don't. Is there potential for it? Without a shadow of a doubt, because ever since that lad won the amateur Arnolds, he has showcased one thing: he is a supreme athlete.
Yeah, and by the way, there was an injury there on the frame as he picked it up. There was an injury, not a major injury, but enough to give him a sleepless night and problems from there on. So it's nothing huge to worry about, but again, he went through an injury. And look at his log last year, which was a huge problem. Like I say, this year he's throwing that axle around, so it's improving. It really is.
Yeah, and when you've got, as I say, when you've got the injury list that he's got and the scars that go along with it, the moment you feel anything, you're hypersensitive to these things, because you're thinking, at what point is it all over?
And probably one of the greatest sights in Strongman is Mateusz throwing around the stone, isn't it?
I think a confident Mateusz, when he's got a swagger about him, I think is both brilliant to watch, but also, if you're another athlete, bloody terrifying.
Yeah,
because he is a sight to behold. It's just, again, outwardly to some people, he's not the most personable, because he seems quite a shy kid at times, but he is genuinely lovely. But once he's on the march, watching him compete, it really is. He's a strong man, but he is, first and foremost, he is an amazing athlete.
Yeah, I think he's got the highest win percentage ever at the Arnolds in terms of events he's done to wins in events. Says a lot, Yeah. And the last guy to talk about is Mitchell Hooper. Mitchell's the real deal.
Yeah,
he's a Marmite character. You can love him or hate him, or I think factually he's the least popular champion there's ever been. I'll say that in Strongman, but he's a hell of a strongman. There's no taking away from it. His performance was very, very impressive.
Yeah, he looks hungry as well. There's the way he's going about some of these things. You know, we know, you know, last year caught with controversy. Just, you know, he can't always be eloquent with his words. You know, and he said what he said last year. In terms of his performance, it wasn't reflected in that. The way he's gone about things since, and you do look at the distractions. You know, he's played the game, but what he has done, and you have to respect him for it in terms of it's across the board. You know, whether it be the social media side of things, the career building, the sort of, you know, making sure you're putting enough aside to make sure that this is going to pay for your existence beyond the sport. I can't fault him for it. It always gets a little bit tricky when it affects your performance, because then you look and just go, right, okay, first and foremost, what are you? He is a competitive son of a bitch, because when he still comes back and does his trade, he goes about it as a winner. And fair play to him. And I say, I know I pick up on that one thing that there's memes and stuff where he's called Arnold over. To have the confidence to be able to do that in the first and foremost, it can always go south. But the fact that you don't believe it's going to go south is testament to, you know, what a competitive son of a bitch he is.
Yeah. And you can talk all you want about, you know, a number of athletes, perhaps the bottom half of the table, not doing very well over the course of the events. But the fact is, if you look at his results, look at the reps, the times, you can't take anything away. It was a complete performance, and it was bang on. And that leads me into the final kind of thing here, that a lot of people are asking me, well, is he going to become the greatest ever? What's going to happen? Is he going to dominate everything? Where do I rank him now? Right now, back-to-back Arnold champions, one world's strongest man. That already elevates him to a very high level in the sport. It's impossible to predict the future because, one, more often than not, injuries suddenly take guys out. We saw Alexei Novikov for a long time right there, and look, now is almost like we haven't even discussed him here, if we're being honest. You know, we see the way guys can drop off. There's also the motivation. There's also the motivation factor as well. You know, will he have that? I'm not sure he will, because like you say, he's setting up all these other things as well. He was even looking at doing this fighting championship. So there's a lot of distractions that come in. Right now, it's farcical to compare him to Big Z, for example. Absolutely farcical if we're talking about greatness. The way I see it, we don't need to be looking at it like that. He's so far, he hasn't put a foot wrong in terms of his performances and things. And let's just see what happens. I do think Thor has showed us that he's beatable if, you know, someone like Thor's back to his best. But
Tom he's beatable, but it's what you do when you're beaten. How do you come back? And every time he comes back, he wins.
Yeah,
you know, and that's the mark of a champion, not just a winner, but that's a champion's mark. Yeah. I've always sort of said there is a discrepancy. There is a difference between a winner and a champion. You know, a winner isn't always going to be a champion in the way that they go about their trade. You know, a champion doesn't necessarily always win because you know, things go against them. But I think as he progresses, and you look through the history books, it doesn't write down the details. It just says win, lose, or draw, and that guy is racking up some numbers.
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's the way I see it. He is ruthless in the way he's doing everything. I experienced myself personally with him. Yeah, I have no connection with him after some things that happen. He's ruthless in the way he does things. You don't have to like him, but you have to respect what he's doing in terms of an athlete in the sport. You have to. One more guy we should talk about is Martins, just because I think people were expecting big things of Martins, but there was a lot of unknown quantities because he's been out for a while. It was an underwhelming performance. He put some jokes out today about that on his social media. Martin's a great character. Is he ever going to get back to what he was?
The hard thing with that competition now is you're left with more questions than you had answers. And it's a shame, you know. I was on a call at the time when the deadlift was going on. I said to someone I was call with, just give me a second, I just want to watch this. I couldn't put them on hold that long. It is a shame. It's because again, it's just unknown, which is irony. Because a fit and potent Martins adds so much to the sport. He's a great character.
Yeah.
It's just, and you do as a spectator, you want all these forces to come together. A good Alexei, a good Tom, a good Mitchell, a good Thor. You want to bring them all together because, by Christ, you're going to get some wicked competition out of it. But in the, I hate saying it, but he looked wounded.
For me, it's lack of motivation slightly, which is completely understandable. Also, I think he's lost some of the mobility and things that he once had. That he was such a smart athlete. He is such a smart athlete.
Stupid strength, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just think his body can't quite do what it was doing. He's still an elite guy, and there's no reason at all that he should stop if he doesn't, unless he wants to. But I don't see him winning a major title again. If he proves me wrong, fantastic, but I don't see it.
Yeah, it is when you sort of see the shape of him. Because when he comes in and he just looks an absolute unit, he showed this in previous competitions, the Rogue again. It's just like when he comes in, he looks an absolute unit. It doesn't look like it suits him. And the performance and the points tallies probably go along with it. Whether you're building that sort of exoskeleton around you to safeguard what is underneath, we don't know the extent of the injuries, and we don't certainly know the extent of how it makes you feel when you're under load. Only he knows that. But the hesitancy in some of the events, the manner in which he goes about them makes you think, is there fear? Is there a few worries in terms of like your sort of body? But a big Martins, a static one, doesn't look like he can win. Whereas, maybe a different approach.
Yeah. Okay, mate. I think that pretty much rounds it up. Big thanks to we've got Jan Todd, Steve Slater, and then we got Bill and Katie Henniger at Rogue. Thanks for those guys. Like I say, we're picking up on a lot of talking points, controversial points, but they put on a incredibly run competition for us for free, live, that has these, like I say, very short breaks. It's competitions that look great, that will bring more fans to the sport. So only good things. And I still believe this is where the genuine strongest man in the world is determined. So huge credit for all those different things. And I hope people appreciate we're just talking about points that I believe are better to be discussed than kind of covered up or swept under the carpet. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, buddy. Until next time, thanks for watching, guys. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you think on all the topics we discussed. We obviously discussed a lot here. We'll be interested to read them, and I'll reply to as many as I can. Until next time, thanks for watching. Thank you.